In a year where lockdowns destroyed tons of companies, Games Workshop was like, nope, we're going to join that elite club that had record profits. Welcome everyone, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. Now that big project I teased a few weeks ago in the MechWarrior Hangar video, well that is taking a little bit longer than expected. So look for that in a few weeks, but until then I thought it'd be fun to take a look at Games Workshop's financial report for the previous year. Being a publicly traded company, Games Workshop must produce its financial report detailing things like revenue, profit, and important numbers like that for their investors. And the fact is this document must be factually accurate and it must be honest. If they were lying in some way, whether the numbers were wrong or they're being deceptive about how things are going, they could get in a lot of trouble with the government. Therefore, this financial report right here, in particular the strategic section at the start, is a great look at what Games Workshop is up to, what they're thinking, and what they may be planning to do in the not too distant future. It's frankly much better trying to analyze a company looking at this than reading a bunch of opinion blogs from gamers. I'm such a jerk sometimes. Even though this is a financial report in terms of how the company has done, it also is a marketing piece to prospective investors. So you got to keep that in mind, that this is also trying to sell Games Workshop as a potential investment to other people. And therefore there is some marketing to spin you do have to work around, and there is therefore a little bit of kind of reading the tea leaves and reading between the lines to figure out what exactly might be going on. So let's take a look at some of the details of the numbers here in the report. As you've probably already heard, this year was crazy successful for Games Workshop. Now, all the numbers in terms of revenue and things like that are in British pounds, so just keep that in mind as I read these numbers off. So revenue is a record $353.2 million. And operating profit was a record of $151.7 million. And you can see right next to those two numbers what they were last year. Games Workshop has been doing really well the past few years, just raking in money. The one thing to note is the revenue at constant currency. Games Workshop sells all over the world, and therefore fluctuations in the value of currencies relative to one another can potentially alter how their revenues look. So, inflation and things like that in one part of the world may cause weird things that happen to their overall revenue numbers. So by using this constant currency, it's a fancy math thing to factor out a lot of those changes in the value of currency and can give a little bit more accurate comparison from year to year in terms of how much money they actually brought in. You've got trade. This is the independent retailers across the world, all your small, local, friendly game stores that Games Workshop sells their product through. Retail refers to Games Workshop's own stores, whether they be Warhammer branded or Games Workshop branded. And finally, online covers their online sales in their web store. Now, the two interesting notes about these numbers here, if you look at trade, which I mentioned were the independent game stores, that went up quite a bit, despite the fact that many of them were affected by lockdowns, at least here in the United States. I can't comment on the rest of the world. They were not essential businesses. Some tried to be, they were not. The government shut those guys down pretty quick, unfortunately. But so, despite that, these game stores obviously sold a heck of a lot more revenue for Games Workshop than expected. I wonder how that translates to other game companies. I have no idea. And then, not surprisingly, online sales are up because a lot of stores were closed. That should become, that kind of thing should be expected. And finally, the retail for Games Workshop did drop a little bit because just like the independent retailers, many of their stores are closed as well, and Games Workshop talks a little bit about that and the effect of the pandemic on the retail stores elsewhere in this document. And the fourth and final way that Games Workshop kind of categorizes their revenue is through licensing and IP exploitation. And no, that's not me making fun of Games Workshop for selling their merchandise to all sorts of companies. IP exploitation is actually a terminology they use, and it'll show up in those reports from year to year. I think this time they used the word exploit their intellectual property, but same difference. And of course, this covers anything that's Warhammer branded that's not Games Workshop, whether it be Total War, the video game series, all the little mobile games they created, the little toys they licensed out to, I don't know who makes those these days, those models. Quoting from the document at page 8, at our 2019 AGM we shared a new phrase, more Warhammer, more often. We believe Warhammer is immense fun, and we wanted to be clear that there are many more ways to take part than ever before, and that all of them should be embraced and supported equally. What you're going to see throughout this whole financial report is Games Workshop basically views themselves as Warhammer. Obviously, Warhammer is the massive part of their revenue, and therefore they're going to use that to move forward and make pretty much all their money around Warhammer. So how did that work for them in 2021? Let's take a look at one more quote from page 8. The results: another solid year building on the great progress and profitable growth we have been consistently delivering over the last 6 years. I will continue to set the bar higher. It is worth noting that historically the launch of a new Warhammer 40,000 edition is normally the financial high point until the next edition of Warhammer 40,000. The goal is to ensure we help more and more people share a love for Warhammer. Our immediate operational plans look encouraging. So this is one of those reading between the tea leaves moments here. The 9th edition, if I got my details right, was July 2020, which would have been the very beginning of the financial year that we're talking about here with this report. And therefore, the author of the strategic report is basically saying this year was expected to be huge because it was a new edition for Warhammer 40,000, and probably hinting that maybe next year things might not be so awesome because it's not a new edition of Warhammer 40,000. That's just my opinion on the matter. We'll see how things go. But I mean, every year they've been raking in money, so who knows. Then on the topic of Age of Sigmar, we have another quote here from page 9, which is not quite as positive as talking about Warhammer 40,000, but not because the game didn't sell well, but because Games Workshop kind of admits they screwed up a bit. Releases for Age of Sigmar, our primary fantasy IP, included 3 new factions and the Cursed City game, which dramatically exceeded expectations, sold out very quickly. We do our best to guess the right number to make, and sometimes we are wrong. Games Workshop is referencing a very specific event. In particular, we're talking about Cursed City, which was the Warhammer Quest box set that was released during this financial period, and it sold out stupidly quick, and you cannot find it anymore. Lord of the Rings itself got mentioned twice in the financial report. So, you know, Games Workshop really wants to be Warhammer. As for everything else, including Lord of the Rings, I got a quote here kind of talking about their performance. This is from page 9. Our other intellectual properties, Necromunda, Adeptus Titanicus, Aeronautica, and Lord of the Rings, are all in good health, receiving a steady stream of new product in the year, while Blood Bowl, our irreverent game of fantasy football, had a new edition, which is enthusiastically received by both new and existing customers alike. We will continue to develop and periodically bring to market new IPs and game systems, giving both existing and new customers more reasons to collect our wonderful miniatures. We have plenty of exciting plans in the pipeline. So if you like any of the games that you read off there, you're probably in good shape, and Games Workshop's going to be releasing more stuff for them. If you play, say, Warcry, not in the financial report. What else? Warhammer Underworlds, not in the financial report. You might be out of luck. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Games Workshop's retail strategy. This is, once again, is their own stores. I picked out a few interesting notes here, but just like everything else in this document, there's tons of stuff. Feel free to read through it and see what you find interesting. So let's start by introducing how Games Workshop views their retail. Quote, "We believe our stores are the best place to start your Warhammer hobby journey with us. It is not a surprise that our 500 plus owned stores have never sold the highest volume of our specific getting started product ranges. That has always been our 5,000 plus independent outlets. But they have always had a dedicated team with extensive Warhammer knowledge, building local communities, and offering Warhammer hobby guidance and support. It is an essential and unique customer service offer that we are proud of." Now, this is nothing new from Games Workshop's strategy perspective. Their stores have always basically been, like I said, a way to get people into the Warhammer hobby, and then wherever they buy their product from there, they don't really care that much. However, the stores do need to more or less be profitable. One interesting note for the United States stores is the opening of Warhammer cafes. I have a quote here from the report. "Our relatively new cafe store in Dallas, Texas is a great example of a new format that we have piloted that is profitable." I'll put a link in the description to this store here on Google Maps, and you can look at some of the pictures people have taken from inside the store. I can't show you those for copyright reasons, but one of them does show the menu of the cafe, which is basically a coffee shop. They've got overglorified Warhammer names for coffee items, and it looks like they sell some Coke products down in the bottom, which is kind of odd since the last time I was in a Games Workshop store playing games, which was like a decade ago at this point, everybody drank Mountain Dew. But, you know, whatever works, I guess. Obviously, it's being profitable for Games Workshop, so go ahead, keep doing it, guys. So I wanted to point out one line here in the report, but I'll leave the social commentary aspect up to you as to what it actually means. Quote, "The majority of new store openings will continue to follow our low-cost, single-staff model. These are previously known as one-man stores. On reflection, this is a poor choice of term and doesn't accurately reflect the diverse group of individuals running our stores. We have never meant any offense ever to anyone." End quote. Let's talk about the online store aspect of things just really quickly here. Quote, "Online sales continue to grow by 70% compared to the same period last year. It more than made up for the sales volume shortfall when physical stores were closed." This is them, Games Workshop, noting the obvious that, you know, this is why their online retail was so high this year. Will it continue? Maybe, maybe not. Now that, well, I'm not sure how things are going to keep going in terms of this whole pandemic thing, so I'm not going to make any predictions. So it's quite possible this is them pointing out that maybe next year online sales won't be quite so high. And then finally, they have some comments on licensing, and they make some interesting notes about some video games coming up. Quote, "In the year, we launched 9 new games, 5 PC console, 4 mobile, and continue to see successful sales of top titles supported by ongoing releases of extra content and expansions. The majority of video game income came from the ongoing success of existing titles this year, highlighting the long-term revenue stream generated by the franchise strategy and the lack of exposure to any one new release's performance." Games Workshop is basically saying the new stuff didn't do well, we made lots of money off the old stuff. Exactly how that breaks down, they're obviously not clear, and once again, those are details you're generally not going to see here in these reports, but it's just interesting to note that. Now, they go on to talk a little bit about some of the upcoming releases, and they mention Total War 3, which is the next, major Warhammer Fantasy Battles video game. It says to be released in the next 12 months, and they've also got 15 video games in development. And, for Games Workshop, being this primarily a licensed strategy, there's not really a lot of risk on their side. And that kind of goes back to some of the comments they mentioned there. They toss out as many video games as possible by many video game developers and let the best one kind of fight their way to the top of the dog pile. And if they fail, that's not really Games Workshop's problem. Sure, they might not get a lot of revenue from the licensing deal, but it doesn't really have a lot of cost on Games Workshop's side either. Alright, well, those are the interesting points I found in the strategic report. There's a whole bunch of more fun stuff in there, and I recommend if you like to see how these companies operate, go ahead and read it, because frankly, Games Workshop is the only dedicated gaming company we have that is publicly traded. Big guys like Hasbro, which has, Wizards of the Coast and all of them, they obviously sell a bunch of more stuff on top of the games thing. So this is our one really cool, interesting look into how games companies actually operate. Alright, so once again, I'm Jason. Thank you guys all for watching. I've got a cool project coming up here for you in the not too distant future, possibly related to one of the games that was not mentioned in this particular report. Oh well, that's a little like me making this thing, but anyway. So if you like these kind of commentary videos, or you like speed painting or assorted projects, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm still going to be not making, weekly videos for a little while here. Long story short, I didn't expect triathlon training to be so much fun. But that's going to be wrapping up here pretty shortly when we get into September, and the water around here is just too cold to swim. So, alright guys, have a great week, or 2 or 3, or who knows when.